Hello and welcome back to another episode of My Grocery Adventure. My name is Carly, and this podcast is for anybody who wants to make an impact in this world. You want to exchange your time and energy on this planet for making it a better place. That's really what we're here to talk about in the overarching arc of all of these episodes. Today, we are joined by Zachary Paige, and he is going to start at the beginning with his story and walk us forward as far as all of the different ways that our path can evolve and blend one chapter into the next, into the next. They tend to build. Sometimes we take random hairpin left turns. It's all good. Yeah, we're gonna share some stories. And with that, Zachary, do you prefer Zach? Zachary? Which is your
Zachary's
go-to?
great. Yeah.
Zachary's great. Okay. Well, Zachary, how about we start with where were you born? Where'd you grow up? What was that like? Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, I was born in East Northport, Long Island, in the suburbs, and it was a great town and place to grow up. Had a lot of love in the household and with both my parents and the schools that I were able to go to had just a great amount of opportunity. So yeah, had a great childhood there.
I would say probably the most urban upbringing of any that we've heard on the podcast so far. Did you have a
Yeah.
sense of the difference between urban and rural, or did you have like the city was like kind of all you knew at that point?
Yeah, so the way Long Island structured in the 90s when I grew up was pretty much a never-ending suburbia. So you're on a road from one town to another, and there's just stores on those roads. So um, after getting to a more rural environment, just realizing there are actually roads in between the towns where there's no towns and no stores,
The
which was a
concept.
different experience. Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
that's
yeah, so then that's a little different than like a bigger city. I mean, some of the towns would be considered a village, and Long Island would be like 50, 60,000 people butted up against another town of 50, 60,000. So, I mean, those are considered like bigger cities out in rural landscape. Um, but then what we would consider the city, New York City, obviously is a few million. So, yeah, a little bit of a difference there. And then when I went to uh, college at SUNY Purchase, it was a little bit more rural, but I really didn't get that experience of being out in rural America until getting out to Minnesota.
yeah. And I want to hear more about like the culture shock of all of that, but first I'd love to hear more about like growing up. How far away were you from New York City and like how often would you say you went there?
Yeah, it's pretty much about an hour. So an hour drive or an hour train ride, and we are pretty close to the train.
And what would you go into the city for?
Oh, culture, cultural activities like Broadway shows, art, music, growing up, like you want to see a band that's coming into town, you might hear that they're coming into New York City. So bringing a few friends, going on the train. It's a fun time.
Yeah. Were your parents like deliberately exposing you to culture to take, they were into that kind of thing, so they took you to things like that?
Yeah, yeah, that happened too. And then also with the school that I went to, we like took trips into the city. I remember a music class went in to see a performance of La Boheme, the opera, and we would go in every so often. And
Wow.
also my mom's mom, after 65, she moved into the Upper West Side and started a whole new life up there for another 31 years before she passed a few years ago. And that was like absolutely amazing to have a really close family member living in New York City to visit and stay with. And she was amazing, and always was up on, all the new exhibits at the Met and all the museums and things going on. So whenever we come in, she'd have this list of ideas for us to do.
Like, I feel like your upbringing is just so the exact opposite of mine personally, but really just like all the guests that we've heard of so far, they're like, I went to school in a cornfield with six other people. And like, you're like, I went to the opera on my school field trip. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like how, okay, so our last guest, Dan Nagengast, he talked about like one of the main things that he felt growing up in rural Nebraska was I want to become worldly.
Mm,
And it truly sounds like, I mean, your world was just so huge and so multicultural from such an early time in your life. And like almost like you just wouldn't have even known anything else.
right. Yeah, that's the thing. You don't really know anything else. You just kind of assume when you're young, you don't really know all the experiences of people. And there weren't a lot of people like coming into um my town that were from rural America. Like maybe they would be, a few towns over, but so and then being on an island and then being yeah, pretty much yeah, far away in some ways from getting out there. I mean, it's kind of hard to get out. I mean, as a teenager or growing up in high school, like to get out past the metropolis, get out past New York City and Philadelphia, and then getting out into rural like Pennsylvania or New York or something. That would be like probably a 3 or 4 hour drive just to get out into rural America because it's maybe an hour to Manhattan, an hour to get through Manhattan, and then another hour or two just to get out into the country. So I honestly didn't really experience anything rural until um, college.
That's that's just so wild. Cause like I think most of us that have been on the podcast and maybe the ones listening, I don't know, I'd love to hear in the comments about like it was like a 4 hour drive to get to a city. You know what I mean? Like the exact opposite of like you could drive for hours and like only be in the part where there's no stores, there's no anything. So, and now, obviously where you live now is probably a lot more like that, where really spread
Yeah.
out, really open space.
Yeah. And then like yeah, on top of like not having the means or the car or whatnot to get out into rural America, the other, obvious thing of like destination, like where, the
Yeah.
destinations are within a city,
Mm.
particularly if you're already in that area. So I remember very particularly in college, the first time I really got out was a bluegrass festival and like kind of like a very small town area and just looking at the stars and thinking, wow, I'm kind of out in the country right now. This is awesome.
Do you see
And then yeah,
stars like in New York? I mean, I've honestly never been there. So, can you
yeah, no, you could
see?
see some. I mean, yeah, some light pollution. But yeah, just being out in that experience in the Bluegrass Festival, and then also years later, working on farms in Vermont, kind of getting that experience a little bit too, and being attracted to being closer to nature.
Mm. I was gonna ask, like, is that why you prefer rural now? Because growing up with access to like all of that culture, all of those amenities, all of those like just different things going on, um, you hear a lot of stories about people leaving rural to like go to the city and you migrated the other way. And so like why leave behind the city? Why go to college in a more rural place? Why settle in, Northwest Minnesota or wherever it is that you are?
Yeah, I think it's something like deep inside that maybe no matter what, I'd kind of be doing something along the lines of what I'm doing now in terms of sustainable food systems and stuff. Because I remember thinking those thoughts like when I was really young, like where does our food come from? Like going back to like grocery too, of just like I would always go with my dad to the grocery store and it was like kind of our thing. Um, and it was called Food Town. And yeah, I remember thinking those thoughts, even when I was a very young kid of I think having the curiosity of wanting to know more about where these food items were grown and what nature was all about. And so I think that kind of built over time. So maybe if I got some of that answered early on, I wouldn't have such bigger questions later on. But, and maybe that, kind of determines part of my um, later years work. But um, yeah, I think it's definitely a part of it. But I think also it was like always an interest.
Do you remember like what sparked that curiosity? Like what sparked those questions of where does our food come from? Because again, you hear the joke of like the kids in the city, they're like, it comes from the grocery store. Like milk
Yeah.
comes from the grocery store, the dairy section at the grocery store, that's about as specific as they can get. Do you know like what opened you up into even wondering about that?
I think my parents were always like encouraging like for us, me and my brother to ask questions and that's part of it. And then another part being um exposed to some documentaries like reading Michael Pollan, watching Food Inc. and some uh um questioning of the food system in the stage of my life that, in college when you're questioning everything, it might inspire a person to figure out those answers on their own. And then I had a friend or two that were working on organic farms in Pennsylvania. So then getting more experience to rural, getting more experience to back to the land stuff, talking with people that experienced the real back to land movement in the 60s, and kind of putting those dots together on the history of food, the history of the food system in the US, where things are going, and then what, a young person or a younger person could do about it and continue to learn.
Yeah. Do your parents like showed you documentaries? Or like how did you get a hold of like watching documentaries as a kid?
Um, and that was probably more about like sharing things along colleagues and friends in college.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And what did you major in college and how did you choose that?
I was always pretty good at music, so it was kind of like a default. Um, like playing clarinet and doing composition courses and being um well versed and enjoying that. So I went to school for music composition at Purchase College.
What does that kind of a degree consist of? Um, I have
It
no
would
clue.
allow like a person to like compose music for like films and orchestras and basically orchestrate anything. So along the lines of commercials or um, yeah, anything you could think of that someone would write music for, like
Hmm.
podcasts, commercials, films, music. Movies. Yeah,
Yeah. So have you like written music for things? Did you use your degree or did you do any of it while
yeah.
you were
I
there?
was involved with some projects in Brooklyn when I post college, and I was also teaching music. Um, but yeah, I just didn't love living in that area, so I was kind of looking for a way out. And yeah, after college, I kind of was exploring work on organic farms during the summers until I eventually came to Minnesota.
Yeah. And the work on the organic farms, like you said, you had a couple friends who worked on the organic farms. Is that how you got hooked up with it, or was it something different?
Yeah, so yeah, I visited my friends in Aaronsburg, Pennsylvania, which is pretty out there. It's like in Penns Valley, beautiful area. And yeah, going out there and hanging with the farmer and just seemed right, it just felt like this is kind of, I remember this very specific moment where I kind of turned to the farmer there and said, I think I want to do this with my life. And he was kind of looked at me, he was like, oh yeah. And you kind of have those moments throughout life where you don't know if you want to do something or not, and maybe say it out loud, but kind of remember it's a little bit of weight behind that one in
Yeah.
particular, and thinking like, I think I probably am gonna do this.
Yeah. What does that feel like? Like what did you recognize that had you so sure?
Oh, just everything like the sound. I was as a part of my music composition interests, I was recording found sounds. So I was like recording the pigs and the wind and
Never even
the
heard that.
chickens and
Found
yeah.
sound.
So
Okay.
found sound, yeah. It's a type of, I mean, it's just a label of, sound basically.
Yeah.
And people use sound in music all the time, but sometimes they call it Foley if it's like in a movie, like a door slamming. And there's like databases of tens of thousands of these kinds of sounds that you would get access to, but you could also create your own library of sorts of sounds. And
Mm.
that's kind of what I was doing, creating ambient music with found sounds. So whether it just be like rain on a roof or some pigs eating or some chickens walking around or some goats, um, I would just collect all those sounds and then create some music on top of it and kind of layer it together. But
And this is like what you did just for fun, just to like entertain yourself?
yeah, and also part of that music degree and stuff.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah. So and maybe that was a part of what I loved about being out in nature, just those kinds of sounds and sensory experiences. And um, I think beyond that, though, just feeling more connected to the earth and having this space to be able to breathe a little easier, literally. I was a smoker for a while, and I think that was a really great way for me to quit smoking and be in the trees and heal. And also, yeah, just connect with people in a slightly slower or, I don't know, more meaningful way of interacting with our food system. And yeah, kind of answering all those questions that I had when I was younger about where things came from, because it was right in front of us.
Yeah. I'm curious, how do you think being in nature helped you quit smoking? Was that the connection you made?
Yeah, that was maybe just formulated in my head of just like this is how I could quit, just like breathing fresher air than, the air of the polluted Brooklyn streets. So it felt easier for me to continue quitting smoking in an environment that was um not polluted.
That's a really interesting idea. And do you think that it had anything to do with, like you said, like the slowing down and just like less frenetic energy in your system? And like possibly the smoking was like calming. It was like a solution for symptoms that like you no longer had when you put yourself in a slower environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Um I think yeah, the way addiction works sometimes is like you feed it with something else. And so maybe my um, addiction for smoking turned into more of a passion for um, learning about food and other things that were slightly healthier. So I felt like it was probably a good trade there.
Right? Like life's all about like making those trades and like one
Yeah.
little increment better. It reminds me of long story short, I moved to Dallas and gained a bunch of weight and it wasn't a mystery why. Like I was eating really, really badly. And one of the substitutions I made was I gave up my jelly bean habit and replaced it with grapes and cherries. You can have as many grapes as you want. You just can't buy the 5 bags of jelly beans at the grocery store every week anymore. Like, no. So yeah, just like one little bit more. But it was to your point, like at the same time that I did that, I was also finding exercise and just feeling better in general. And so I feel like I was soothing myself with the jelly beans. And once I didn't need to be soothed anymore, giving up the jelly beans like wasn't. wasn't nearly as hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes, yeah.
Little story.
Jelly
And
beans are good though, every once in a while.
oh
Gotta get
God,
some jelly
a
beans.
little too
Yeah.
good, if you ask me. Especially those black ones, man. Like they're just, I could have a whole bag of
Is
those
that the
guys.
licorice?
Oh yeah. Black licorice, black jelly beans.
Well, you could get
Summer.
like really, really fancy, expensive licorice, so then you won't want to eat a lot.
So I'll just like savor it and like
Yeah.
dose it out to
Because
myself.
there's some pretty high-end licorice out there
Like
I've found because I
artisan
like
licorice.
yeah, so
Mhm.
it's like,
Okay.
you know, pricey licorice, so you're not gonna wanna, just
You would
totally.
think that I'd be reasonable like that, and I guarantee you it'd probably still be a bad deal. That's why I had to stop buying candy because like I'll just eat it all. But anyways, so back to your point of like being more in nature and feeling like, I mean, you listed off several benefits that I'm sure it was kind of like an overall effect of feeling better in your life and feeling better in your mind, in your body, in your connections with people. I mean, you listed off having the answers to the questions that you wanted to know. I feel like that would probably be soothing for your mind. Connecting with people in a slower, more meaningful way. That feels good to the heart.
Yeah.
Like, it just sounds like it was a really positive change for you to leave the urban setting and be in and you said that was in rural Pennsylvania.
Uh yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, I was getting more into food and then it was in Pennsylvania and then I worked a few years in Vermont and organic sustainable farms and
Like doing the same thing that you were doing in Pennsylvania, or was that doing something a little bit different
uh yeah, organic farms, sustainable farming.
at both places?
Yeah.
And why did you make the change from the one to the other?
Oh, well, Pennsylvania was just like a week or two and then
Oh,
that was just like visiting my friend and then I actually like got like a season in or with going to a sustainable farm in Vermont. And then from
gotcha.
there I was kind of like I got to make a change in my life because I was, living in kind of the city-esque area and teaching music. So I was thinking, well, I kind of want to get out of the city area. And I also got another job. I was always worked in restaurants also throughout my life. And I was kind of getting more and more skills in the last few years also. So that was like a parallel potential career choice of being a chef and kind of working my way up a few decent restaurants and up to the point of lead chef and getting trained in. So that was like kind of like two things going on. Decision needed to be made of should I stay and should I stay or should I go? Stay and be a
Totally.
chef and I love food and then kind of go and learn go deeper into the rural America and learn more about clean energy and food systems and some other sustainable um natural resource questions that I had. So I think in the end, my heart was in learning more and getting out there and exploring. So that's what I did.
Mm. And was it hard still, even though your heart is taking you this way, was it still hard to leave behind the life you had to leave behind?
I prepared pretty well, I think,
How
for it
so?
the last few months or so. So I was like dwindling down my possessions and yeah, I was excited. So it was, something that wasn't as hard. So
It
I
sounds
kind of
like you
prepared
had,
for it.
yeah, you had a few months to kind of get up to speed with the change and let it unfold at a nice pace. It
Yep.
wasn't like this all happened
Yeah.
in like a week.
Right. Yeah. I had the privilege of time on my hands of just mulling it over for months. So
As
it
we
wasn't,
do, as we all do,
yeah.
sometimes you need those months. Um, that's so awesome. What do you remember is like the best thing, like when you got to Vermont, your new life? Like that's such a different change of pace and all of that. Like, what do you remember being like, I'm so grateful I did this because
Um, I just like working hard physically, and so I enjoyed like working the long days. I mean, that's like something you don't really get out in nature in a urban environment so much. Like you might find a job like working construction or something, but you're still in the city. So
Mhm.
being out, completely out in like blue sky with the soil and the few people to talk with all day and, weed some garlic and look at the birds and hear, um, the wind and hear the quiet. I think all that was attractive.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there are people who are just tuned to nature and it's like it lights up in a magical way, like you're saying, like all this different sounds and whatever. And then you could stand somebody in the middle of that same spot and they're like, okay, I see it. Are we done now? Can we go back to all the stimulation, all the noises, all the things? Yeah. I mean,
Right.
and it really is just a matter of like finding the environment that brings out the best you that you can find, if it feels better.
Mhm.
I didn't realize that you were at the Pennsylvania one for only like a week. So that must have been a really profound week. Like the fact that that
Yeah.
was kind of the turning point of like, wow, like I want this. I want my life
Yeah.
to be this. And then maybe, yeah, it was a few months. Is that right? Like you had that experience and then those were the few months that you molded over and then you took your left turn.
Yeah. I would say, yeah, the few weeks in Pennsylvania was really inspiring. And then working in Vermont was again like kind of doubling down on being even more inspiring. I got more questions. I was on the farm thinking, um, they were a sustainable farm. So I was thinking if they're sustainable, do they save seeds? So that was another question I had in my mind about seeds in general and saving them and why people do it or don't do it, and what that means for sustainability. So that led me to wanting to learn more and then eventually going to Minnesota and other places, going back to school for plant breeding later on and um, continuing the journey of seed saving, seed breeding, got a master's in seed breeding and started my own organic vegetable seed company, North Circle Seeds, eventually. So some of those questions really got in deep around that time in Vermont.
Yeah. And you said you did it in seasons, meaning like you were only there for a little while and then you went back, or like how did that part, what does that mean that you did it in seasons?
The farming season, and then I would teach music in the
So like you would
fall
go back to the city?
just for 1 year, and then I went to Minnesota.
Gotcha. So was it only one season in Vermont?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Wow. Yeah. I mean, talk about a life-changing year of your life. How old were you that year? Do you remember?
I was like 25.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense as far as like, is this it or is this not it? Like that was about the same time that I had
Yeah, I think
my,
that's what a lot of people are thinking, you know,
yeah. What do you think a lot
what
of people are
direction
thinking?
is my life gonna go in? And then I was meeting a lot of people around that time that were like 30, and they're like, once you hit 30, you don't have these questions anymore. You're like, my life is my life. And it's hard to imagine when you're like mid 20s or so, like that it's gonna get easier to figure out like direction in life. But I think once I hit, early 30s, I was pretty satisfied with everything.
Well, you made some choices that
Yeah.
not everybody would have made the same choices to leave behind the old life and build a new one out of nothing, Not everybody takes that leap. And yeah, I feel like when we hit our 30s, either you're satisfied by the risks you took and they're paying off, or hopefully not regretting the risks you didn't take and how like wow this
Yeah.
path just did not get better with time. you know like
Mhm.
that was, do I stay at the software company or do I make the leap into I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm going to start my own business, and like
Yeah.
I mold that thing for like 4 years and eventually it was just like the risk, I feel like it's riskier to stay where I am because the path is not getting better. And what's it going to be at 30, at 35 if I stay here because it pays well? Like if that's the only reason that I have, I my heart wanted something different. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
you jump and you don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah. Got to jump at least once in life, right? Got to risk
Or
that.
all the
Yeah.
time, I heard a quote this morning that I really love that's like 20 seconds of courage every day will change your life. And
Mm.
I'm like, wow, that's a really interesting idea. And so today's day one, and already I've used my 20 seconds of courage like four different times. And already it's like, wow, like I have openings happening in my world that like weren't even there yesterday.
Mm.
So a little bit of courage goes a long way. But yeah, to your point, like hopefully everybody does it at least one time to prove
Yeah.
like you can change your life. You can make it what you want it to be. You can say yes to your heart. That's allowed. Scary, but allowed. So
Yeah.
you go to Vermont and you're doing the season and you're going to go back to the city and teach music. And so like how did that lead to Minnesota? Sounds like that's where you went next after that
Yeah.
year of back and forth. How did that turn happen?
Um, so I was looking to do a more a bigger change and to work for a farm or learn from like the farmers and the stewards of the land before um like colonialists came. So the agricultural system in America or Turtle Island has been like thousands and thousands of years with Native American land stewards. So I was getting deep into it. Yeah, I was like kind of thinking, well, if I'm gonna do it, if I'm gonna learn, I should learn right and learn from people that have been doing it for, the longest and have the most history doing it. So I was trying to find Native American like nonprofits and groups around the East Coast, but there didn't seem to be too many overall, or at least none that I could find around that time in Vermont, because that's kind of where I was leaning to go. They had some Abenaki groups, um, but in terms of like workload and also like capacity to be someone to volunteer, the place that I found with Winona Duke, the land recovery project, seemed like it was happening and there was some need for the community. And I got to talk with Winona a few times about maybe coming out and kind of her describing, vast amounts of need with whether it be poverty or low income and just places that I knew I would be able to just um, provide um, some help. And on top of that, my own personal like journey of just wanting to learn more about agriculture seemed to fit into because there were like food sovereignty projects that were happening. So yeah, just wanting to learn about what the projects were and then help out, as a kind of like a volunteer. So through AmeriCorps, I was able to volunteer for 2 years from 2012 to 2024. I mean, 2012
And
to
14.
2014.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's okay.
Yeah.
And what is AmeriCorps? I don't think I've ever heard of that.
Yeah, AmeriCorps Vista program started with JFK around that time to help with civil rights. And I think it's one of the best ongoing programs still to this day. It's kind of like the Peace Corps for America to combat low income and I would suppose rural communities. And the way it's structured is pretty well thought out too, because it's the community that hires or puts out the ask for vistas, and then the community writes the job description, and then the community hires the people that they would want. So the people that they would get in could be from anywhere. It could be within the community if they have people that are interested. It also could be people from outside the community that maybe have some different capacities to bring in. So I think what Land Recovery Project did, and I think what a lot of nonprofits or community groups do when they put out the notice for award for AmeriCorps Vistas is, they kind of do a mix of both, right? Like get some people from within the community that know the community really well. Also, it's led by the community, but then also get in potentially some people with other skills from outside. Like I didn't know that I had development skills, but I kind of was thrown into, grant writing and keeping up with some of that, which led me down that direction actually in my career later on is because of being just thrown into that role of, being a decent writer and writing for funding. I didn't know that I would develop, that kind of skill later on. Um, but yeah, just filling those roles too is something of importance to groups trying to make positive change and impact.
Yeah, that's huge. Having the knowledge of how to write the grant, how to find the grant, all the things. I mean, grants come up over
Yep.
and over again in these conversations. And it's like if there's one skill that I can see like threaded through so many different things, it's like grant writing, getting the
Yeah.
funding to like, yeah, what is it that you want to do? That's so cool. I didn't even know that the AmeriCorps existed. So I learned something new today. So thank you for that. And did you like Dan, he talked about being in the Peace Corps and how like he kind of presented like here's the skills I have. And they talked about like this position, he eventually got in a different position. What was that like? Did they ask you like what kind of work do you want to do? And you told them, and then they ultimately picked your project or place based on like what they had available, or like how, like exactly where did you land when you started working for them?
I might have came at it backwards because I just wanted to work for Land Recovery Project and like hang out with the community here and volunteer and help out and kind of like do like woofing in a way, just kind of which is the worldwide organic opportunities on organic farms. It's kind of like a hippie idea of like just, getting housed somewhere for free and then kind of working for free, but just paying your own as you go. So that's kind of was my thought was like I would just kind of volunteer and move to like other places and keep, on this train of learning. But the volunteer Vista program was like offered to me when I was there. So then that was a summer program, and then pretty soon after I was invited to do like another year and then another year. So um, yeah, it was a good way to get paid a little bit. I mean, it's volunteer amount of money, so it's like $400 every 2 weeks about. So it's like barely enough to live on. And you're encouraged to get EBT and um, yeah.
Well,
So and then yeah, we got some housing too, which helped. So yeah, it's very yeah, it's I think the one uh thing about America Vista is it's hard for maybe someone that is already like low income to do Vista because it's almost geared towards like post-college grads that might have some extra privilege and money to burn. Because I think I burned a couple $1,000 just to be able to live
mm-hmm,
with that, very meager AmeriCorps salary.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you already have a house and stuff, you could, yeah, I suppose you could probably make it work with the EBT and everything.
Hmm. That's fascinating. Um, okay, so you said that was 2 years?
Yeah, so then at the end of the 2 years, I was learning seed saving. I went to this native seed search seed school, which is and also another nonprofit in Arizona. They do all sorts of seed work, and I kind of got inspired there to start my own seed company even more because of the really inspiring Bill McDorman, who was leading the classes at that time, and just how important it is to do the work of seed stewarding and how much of that's been lost throughout the last 100 years. So I brought some of that knowledge back from that school in terms of record keeping and keeping seeds, and also helping play a role in um, funding with the Indigenous Seed Keepers Network. And so that was led by Indigenous seed keeper leaders in the region and in the country, and helped yeah, get some funding. So I had a role with that project for the next 3 years. And then after that, started working more with the White Earth Tribe and food sovereignty, and continuing working with food systems. One of the big things we got was a grant for a mobile market, um, which was essentially a food truck that would deliver groceries throughout the tribe. A creative solution to, not having a grocery store yet, but a grocery store on wheels. And throughout that, from 2017 to 2022, 5 years, helping with garden tilling programs and growing vegetables throughout the White Earth area, but also starting my own farm and starting my own seed company during that time as well.
You mentioned that starting your seed company, you became even more inspired when you went to Arizona and heard the person. I didn't catch the name, but
Yeah, Bill
um,
McDorman. Yeah,
okay,
if
yes.
you're out there.
So I'm wondering, like, it sounds like you were already thinking about starting your own seed company if you got inspired even more. Is that, did I read that right?
Yeah, because in Vermont, I was kind of questioning a lot about why didn't sustainable farms save their own seed, and then I kind of like got a lot of those questions answered at that seed school, and
Yeah.
that inspired me. Yeah,
Well, and so my other
I could go
question,
into that, but that's maybe another conversation because I
I
could talk for
want
hours about
I want to
seeds. So
know because like that's why I love these episodes. Like people say things and I'm like I've literally never had this cross my mind. Found sound, saving seeds. Like these are things that I don't even know exist. AmeriCorps. So yeah, eye-opening conversation. And I also really want to know what was so inspirational about Bill McDermott. Like what broke through of what he was doing.
he was literally jumping around the room. Like he's just a very like charismatic, like
Really excited.
really excited and infectious in a way. It was just
Yeah.
like how abundant seeds are. Like you grow one seed out and you get 8,000, and looking at corn pollen, like there's a billion in there in one tassel. Like there's not a billion of like many things in nature, and just this very extraordinary scientific facts, but also just, yeah, almost a magical sense of like
Yeah.
what seeds provide in terms of abundance and the capacity of hope in a way. And like it's, there's a lot of like seed metaphors that come out, like planting a seed as an idea, or um, and yeah, maybe that's just something I'm attracted to as well. And I'm always like a very um, optimistic person. And the way I look at like things like climate change, like I'm very optimistic about it in terms of um, growing year to year. Um, every year, climate change and global warming is going to look differently. It's happening, but my personal opinion is like it's difficult to predict. I think of about 5 years ago, people were really, really talking about wetter springs as a trend, and in my mind, I'm like, I don't know, maybe. And then right now, just the last year or two, people are talking about hot, dry springs, and then now we're looking at no snow in February, which is very odd. So I think a lot of that. Um, um, Adaptability in life with seeds, with work, that quality has really stuck out to me as an important life quality. And so you're adapting seeds year to year. That's what the seeds know. If you're listening to the seed and saving them, what you're selecting for is something that's thriving in the environment in that 1 year. Obviously, life goes on past 1 year cycles, but there's something to be said about recharging every year, every week. There are these rhythms, and um, to be listening to and to be open to um, listening to the people around us and the environment around us and the seeds around us is something that I think I started to um, really develop as an adult and wanting to incorporate into my seed business. So it's North Circle Seeds, and I see it as a circle of growers, a circle of life, and we're in the north. And yeah, there's this um I was raised Jewish, and there's this Jewish tradition, or not tradition, but kind of thought of like there's a crack in everything. I think Leonard Cohen has a song where he says that in a lyric, and I kind of take that to heart, where to mean for me that I don't know everything, and the crack is the openness, and the openness is to learn from others, and um, yeah, and if we're trying to predict, which we do, that's the markets, right? We try to predict customers and behavior, and it's good to do to be able to understand groups, but to also to be open to the changes and to try to be aware and then to adapt to those changes. So that's my little rant about
Oh,
seeds and how it kind of got me roped in to those kinds of ways of thinking.
yeah. I love what you said about like the picture he painted of just how much possibility there is with a seed. Like I heard another quote
Yeah.
that really this reminds me of this like a single acorn holds the promise of 1,000 forests. That like if you
Hmm.
have the start, I mean, it's kind of limitless. Like that's the whole point of nature and the
Yeah.
continuation of it. So
And the abundance is like completely overwhelming. So I think that's the other like thing that I've learned about with seed work is like you're looking at worlds within worlds within worlds, which is what the universe is, right? We have, multiple universes out there. So it's too much to even comprehend, right? So doing seed work, you're constantly selecting for like one plant or like 10 or like, these very, very small numbers. And in your head, you're thinking, how many things did I not select? And it's insane. It's infinities, right? You're keeping out basically infinity type numbers, and you're selecting for these very, very small numbers. And it's an overwhelming thought that how much we're able to do that. And we have to do it to survive and live all the time. But if we're really mindful of like how each time we say no to an idea, which we do, um, it defines us as within our work as well. So I think that's like kind of trained my mind to be able to carry that on to other kinds of work, like with my business or with the university, and be able to make decisions and to feel comfortable with yeah saying saying no to like some things that seem really, really appealing, but you have to be, as we grow up, have to um, define ourselves with the work that we are able to dive the deepest into. And by doing that, we have to give up a lot of other things on the outside.
that's really beautiful concept. And in general just sounds like the opposite of FOMO, which I feel like most people
Yeah.
fall on that side of the camp of like they gotta have it all. And what you're talking about is like the superpower, the brilliance even of like being willing to say no 99
Yeah.
billion times because the one is the one you want. You don't need 99, but you need the one that is the right one, like
Right.
most people don't think like that. Not that I do
Yeah, because it's
anyway.
all about selection. Yeah. It's like selecting the plants that are growing well in a population. Like you might have thousands of plants, but you're selecting a few. So thinking
Yeah.
about all the grains of pollen, all the kernels, all the things you didn't select. I mean, you could eat them. You could put them back into nature. You could do something with them. You could put them into making fuel or something else useful, or, just putting it back into the soil where the squirrels are going to enjoy it. Um, and everything has a place. But yeah, I think that's also like I'm not the best at that also. So that's also why that's my kind of mantra is because I'm always doing a lot of different things. So it's always a good reminder to keep at it, to keep um selecting the things that,
Yeah.
we're doing the most focused and meaningful work because yeah, like we only have so much time. So to do one thing really, really, really well I think is a great thing when people can figure out what the one or two things are in their life that they could do that with.
Yeah. Do you think 7-year-old you would have believed that that one thing was seeds? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, 7-year-old. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
maybe. I mean, I remember like saving marigold seeds with my dad when I was about like 8 or 10 and thinking that it was pretty cool. We would just like take the seeds and put it into a paper bag and I mean, maybe that was where I got some curiosity from
Yeah.
too. But yeah, I don't think it would have been that far out of the realm. I don't think I really had a solid idea of like what I wanted to be.
Yeah. Oh, well, and I know you said that's your little rant about seeds, but I feel like I still have a bunch of questions and I have to give you props because I gotta say, like, seeds, probably not one of the topics where I'm like, oh, yeah, that's probably fascinating. Like, I feel like probably like me, a lot of people overlook it as like, they're
Hmm.
so small. It's just seeds. Like, how interesting could that be? But, like, dude, I feel like you've opened up worlds within worlds within worlds over here. So thank you for
Yeah.
that. And thank you, Bill McDermott, whoever you are, for inspiring such enthusiasm about this abundance. Like I love feeling for abundance in lots of ways. And yeah, I never thought a conversation about seeds would that's where you're gonna end up. What
Yeah,
what
yeah.
are the freaking chances? That's awesome. Um, would you please come back and we could continue the conversation? Because there's definitely more that I would like to hear about seeds in general. And then, like you said, about doing one thing really, really well. And yet you are multifaceted, multi-talented. You've taken it in multiple different directions that I'd like to explore that process of like, even though it's all seeds, still like you're doing business with seeds. You had a podcast at one point with seeds. Like you're still taking it in multiple different directions, like all still kind of on that same central theme. So yeah,
Yeah.
come
And I
back.
think the central theme, like just to keep my what I want to be doing and um trying to keep that focus
Yeah.
as much as possible is changing my mindset a little bit more geared towards food systems. And I'm really enjoying that work. Um, I started with the University of Minnesota RSDP, Regional Sustainable Development Partnership. And we could talk more about that next time and all the great work we're doing with grocery stores, rural grocery stores, and yeah, I guess to connect one piece is like we sell our seeds in a lot of food co-ops. And
Nice.
EBT actually takes the money for seeds. So yeah, there's a lot of really interesting connections with what's happening in Minnesota. A lot of great movement with grant opportunities that Minnesota's learned about and supported and increased support for with infrastructure of food aggregation systems, which is a fancy word for food hubs or farmers coming together to store their crops, and also food co-ops, which I'm on the board for our local food co-op and where I'm at. And um, yeah, collaborative food systems work seems to be the focal, if anything. I mean, there's a lot to that, but
Yeah.
that's what keeps it fun, I think, too, is to be involved in something that is a little bit of a bigger scope that involves lots of different people and expertise that gets into marketing and business, but it also gets into the real growing and soil health and these things that are creating a real positive impact. And to be able to connect all those things together in positive ways, not only for the producers and the land, but to provide educational resources for customers and people to learn and connect. There's infinite ways to do it. And it's great to be in a role that supports that effort.
Yeah.
And would love to talk more about all of that next time.
Yes. Yes, please. Okay, cool. Well, we will be back on the next episode to dive even deeper into this world within a world and see what else fascination we can bring to light for me and for anybody else who has listened. So, thank you so much, Zachary, for being with us on this episode. Very much looking forward to the next one. All of you who have listened, thank you so much for spending your time with us. It means a lot to me that these stories are getting brought to the light of day. These people who they show up in all kinds of ways and they do all kinds of fascinating things that you never even heard of. And it's all happening right now. Like there's so many possibilities for how we can each show up and make a positive impact. You can literally do whatever interests you. There's a pathway into it that's perfect for you, no matter who you are, where you're coming from. And I love that these episodes get to widen out the view of possibility of what people might be considering for themselves. So, again, Zachary, thank you for being here and sharing your story. We'll be back next time. Everybody, have a great rest of your day, great week, and we'll see you on the next one. Okay, bye.